Listen up, beautiful nerds. Vienna 1846, you are in labor. There are two maternity clinics. Women know that the first clinic has a terrifying reputation. Women admitted they are dying at a dramatically higher rate. You've heard women beg not to be sent there, but admissions rotate, and today is the first clinic's turn. We all know the story of hand washing and the famous figure behind it, Ignaz Semmelweis. But do you know the dark history behind hand washing? Because in the 1840s, women were dying at alarming rates from something called puerperal fever, also known as childbed fever. And at the Vienna General Hospital, something strange was happening. The hospital had two maternity clinics. The first clinic trained physicians and medical students, and the second clinic trained midwives. The first and second clinics were the actual names of the clinics. And women admitted to the first clinic were dying at roughly 3 times the rate of women admitted to the second. Nobody knew why. In July 1846, Hungarian physician Ignaz became an assistant at the first clinic, and he was determined to figure out what was killing these women. He considered different explanations, but nothing could explain why women in one clinic were dying at such a dramatically higher rate. Then, in 1847, one of his colleagues died. See, during an autopsy, a medical student accidentally cut physician Jacob Kaleshka with a scalpel. Jacob became severely ill and died. Now, when Ignaz learned what had happened to him, he noticed something. See, the changes found in Jacob were remarkably similar to what he had seen in women who had died from childbed fever. And suddenly, light bulb, the difference between the two clinics started to make sense to him. See, the doctors and medical students in the first clinic performed autopsies. The midwives in the second clinic did not. So, doctors could go from handling dead bodies to examining women in labor without disinfecting their hands. Now, this next part is important because Ignaz didn't know bacteria were causing infections because the germ theory hadn't been established yet. But he believed it was some kind of decomposing material from the cadavers that was being carried on their hands and introduced into the women's bodies. So he ordered doctors and medical students to disinfect their hands using a chlorinated lime solution, and the mortality rate dropped, nerds. But he eventually realized that his original theory was too narrow. He realized that cadavers weren't the only possible source of contamination, so he expanded his disinfection practices. By 1848, mortality in the first clinic had fallen to around 1.3%, which was essentially the same as the midwives clinic, which means it worked. But there was a problem, nerds, because Ignaz could show that his methods was saving lives. They could see that numbers drop, but he couldn't fully explain why. The microorganisms responsible for these infections weren't yet understood. So his ideas were, of course, challenged, criticized, and sometimes ridiculed. Now, others rejected his explanations altogether. Over the years, he continued fighting for his ideas, and as women continued dying from a disease he believed could be prevented, he became increasingly furious with the doctors who had rejected him. In 1861, he finally published his major work on childbed fever, but 4 years later, something happened to Ignaz. See, because in the summer of 1865, his family and colleagues, including his wife, became alarmed by a sudden dramatic change in his behavior. They decided he needed institutional care. Ignaz traveled to Vienna believing he was on his way to a German spa, This part always breaks my heart because they tricked him basically. Instead, he was brought to an asylum after he was told he was going to a spa. When he realized he was being confined, he resisted and he reportedly tried to escape through a window. He was violently restrained, and only 14 days after entering the asylum, Ignaz Semmelweis was dead. He was only 47 years old. The man who spent his career trying to prevent fatal infections died from an infection himself. And he never lived to see germ theory provide the explanation for what he had discovered. Today, Ignaz is remembered as the savior of mothers. Thank you for watching, my lovely friends. I am Glory from Archives of the Century. Stay safe, stay weird, stay curious. I'll see you in the archives, my historian friends.